Greetings and welcome back to Homebrew. Today we're doing a recap of our first episode of the Call of the Hunger campaign, and we are also going to start planning ahead for the session 2. Now, if you haven't looked back at our original planning phase, we had a campaign prep episode that can get you situated and ready for today. Also, if you're looking to watch the episodes without spoilers, I recommend that you skip these videos, as these are really just more so help for DMs who are new to planning campaigns, especially sandbox or their own world where they're not running modules. So go ahead and skip on over this video and start in on the next episode of Call of the Hunger, which should be coming here shortly. Anyways, so before we move forward on that, let's talk a little bit about episode 1 of Call of the Hunger. Now, I personally had a blast with this episode. My friends, all who are in the middle, the party players, were all very happy with the playthrough as well, and with the introduction of their new characters. That being said, there were a couple of points that we could have improved on, so why don't we cover those now? To begin with, we actually, at the very beginning, were discussing or describing the setting, which this first setting took place in Lemoyne. What I usually do is I will give a backdrop in the general feel of the area that the characters are immediately in. I think this really helps paint the tone. It doesn't have to get everything perfect, as you're looking for copyright-free images off of the internet and stuff like that. But you just want to get something that paints the general feel, so that way the characters or the players can get it in their heads and start immersing themselves. Now, I spent quite a bit of time describing all of the intricacies of this area, and I might have not needed to go into too much of the detail on the political structure too much. Players can just start getting distracted by all the name drops. I introduced a bunch of the Pantheon in some of their descriptions as well, and it can get some of your characters a little bit distracted. Now, I kind of see it as when you're starting a book. If you're going to read the first book in the Game of Thrones, there's a lot of name dropping for things that you're not going to be familiar with, but you have to start somewhere. Otherwise, the players will never feel the experience of being immersed into your world. So I always start off with a little bit too much, knowing that, one, eventually my players will understand what all that stuff is. And two, when I start to describe something and immerse my characters, then they can reciprocate that, right? So I don't like necessarily having players who think that this is a video game and go, all right, where's the little dots on the road that say where the next guy I need to kill is, and then let's move forward from there. I'm looking for more of that role-playing feel, and so I want to encourage that. The second point of this is, as far as encouraging roleplay, is that if I start to describe something and I'm using the different senses and tastes, it's acrid air that stings your lungs and you smell rotted this, that, or the other. And then we move over to another area where I go, hey, you guys entered this room and it's a room that's full of books and tables. And the players are going to start asking, if he didn't give me some information, now they're going to start asking for some information, right? Like, well, what kind of lighting is there, right? And what that can do is starts to, if they notice a vacuum of my details, they can start asking questions to fill in some of those things that I normally would have, right? And the purpose of that is when you start adding things like traps or hidden items and stuff like that, you really don't want to just thrust it at them. And this is a really good point to start building on their skills to, understand that things can be described in so many different ways and that it's interactable. So that being said, I had a little bit of a back and forth trying to get the description of the alleyway and the description of the place at large. I kind of messed up that sort of thing. So you're gonna have some of that, especially when you have your first episodes and stuff like that, or first sessions for you guys. Simply because there's a lot that you want to set up as far as the background of the world or of the immediate city or of the area. So moving off of that, at the end of the first session, we had all of the players together heading out of town. So I consider that a success. Everything else you can kind of tweak nuts and bolts, so to speak. One of the items that kind of played out what I would consider as nice is that We had Archek die, and yet Emery moved on out of town without confirming his death. Which, for us, the reason why this is good is because she could have just taken off and gone and found the Bronze, who supposedly killed her ally, right? And that would have put us really into danger zones that we really don't want to mess with right away, right? Also, would have been a potential that her character never would have met up with the others. So there's a bit of a risk there, but it was calculated. Now she's with Wallaby, and she's suspicious of Wallaby, right? Which means that we can build off of that and fan this. Are you an ally, or did you betray me and kill Archek? That sort of thing. So that'll be fun. We also introduced Vivigeni, the leader of the Tekeknu, the bug people in town, and explained that there's some benefit to be had if they go to Paratisium and describe what happened to Archek. Maybe our character Emery, our player character Emery, wants some vengeance or some good to come out of that, so we planted some seeds for that. We also remembered that her character needed to have someone help her with her brother's soul fading away, and so we remembered that Diala was going to be the fix for that, courtesy of Wallaby's connections, and we're able to start that process. Now, this was both good and bad for us. The good stuff is that we've got that secured. Emery's got a quest to go and take care of this stuff, and it's all going to work out. The bad thing that happened is that although we talked about it at the beginning in our session 0, Ilya does not like magic, and Wretch, who uses magic also, doesn't like bad magic, necromancy, that sort of thing, right? And so what we end up having is a situation right out the gates where we build tension right before the group is supposed to come together and start gluing together, and we don't want that tension right there immediately, right? So one way we can spin this is that this is an opportunity for Ilya to develop personal growth. He's very suspicious of magic. He doesn't trust magic, right? And so we can see him at his worst at the beginning of this campaign, and hopefully we can see him at his best later on when he's starting to understand this stuff, right? Same thing with Wretch's suspicions on evil magic, right? We described through Diala that necromancy, in many ways, is the recycling of stuff in the world, right? That's not necessarily bad. It's something that can be used for evil intentions, though. And I think Diala did a good job confusing him just enough that he needs to start planting the seed, and that, he didn't start bonking people, as he likes to say, right? So we described that, Motleti, which is their version of hell, is where some of that more caustic, evil comes from, right? Or from people who use and abuse things like necromancy. So I think that went I think it could have gone better as a DM. I could have been a little bit more cognizant of that and maybe tried to split up the party. Maybe had Emery deal with that on her own. I think we would have handled that a lot better, but it's okay moving forward, right? I also described Diala as having yellow pupils. She should have had a flash of bright white pupils based off of the lore of my world, but that's okay. We can describe that as, she was currently had a illusion on her body. She's not a leprechaun. She's a light djinn. So that's something that we can play off of as it was just part of her illusory leprechaun outfit or whatever, right? So anyways, we also kind of just threw in a date, 1 Twillet in 3 days, so 23 days for these group is how long that Emery would have for getting this quest done. Well, that's actually a pretty decent amount of time. If we look at our woodlands here, I actually mapped it out a little bit on as far as how far our characters would have to go. So they would have to go to the Arboretum, that's my intentions anyways, and back to Lemoore in order to basically get this quest done. And each one of these squares is rough terrain, so it'll take about 2 days travel for every one square except for these first two. So you got 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 days there, 13 days back. That's 26 days. They got 23 days to do it, which means that they're going to have to haul. But the other thing is that, so it's a little bit tight, right? Potentially too tight for them to be able to make the journey. The other thing is that I actually really kind of looked back and made a timeline for my world, and this doesn't actually match up with the last the last what's the word for it? The last Twillet that we had in the Taking Root campaign. And so I just went back and I just flushed that out a little bit. I'm going to say it's 20 days and 8, so 28 days, not 20 days and 3, and I'll just let them know that, right? So that's super easy. Just be like, hey, you have 28 days, not 23, and they'll be like, okay, whatever. Like, they're not really going to think about that too much. And then once we start getting closer and closer, we can say, hey, it's getting closer, heads up, this stuff is moving forward. So since then, I just started to think about what would actually happen with Emery's character if she was late. And so I started to flush that out. You guys can think of whatever you want. Just think of something that sounds bad but isn't going to like ruin the character. So I decided is that her brother, who she really cares about, is still going to exist. He's not going to go away. The character, Emery, still going to exist, not going to go away. But what's really bad is that her brother is going to be basically his soul, which she's now possessed with, is going to turn into it's going to be embedded into a fetus in her, and so she's actually going to be carrying her brother, who's going to be birthed into a really nasty creature that's going to want to find its way back to Diala. So terrible, terrible, nasty consequences that would not necessarily come up right now, right? So what we would do is she misses the due date, no pun intended, and she just loses the possession of her brother. Her brother no longer possesses her, and that's all she experiences. And then we'll start doing some drops about, starting to crave certain types of food, etc., her stomach swelling, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the thought with that. Hopefully it never comes to that, though, okay? So what else do we have preparation for? Well, I thought that first fight with the Manticore went really well. The players did not get tested too hard. In fact, Wretch healed once and pretty much healed all the damage that they took. So what we did is I made another structured encounter, down at the bottom of where that smokestack is washing them out. It's going to be in the ways, which I already alluded to was potentially dangerous. So I'm having them, they got their sacks on, they're going to jump down into the water, they're going to wash into the cavern system, and I made a structured encounter for them to fight. I split them up to see I thought that would be kind of fun. So we got, one character over here, we got one character all the way down in the corner over here, and one over here. And then I'm just going to leave Wallaby out, and I'm going to throw him in for, like a Deus Machina, right? So if one of the characters starts to get overwhelmed in their little corners, he's going to run over and stab something in the back. So he's roguish in nature, so it's very plausible that he got washed out somewhere, stayed hidden, and then was ready to pounce on something that was about to knock out one of these characters and start turning the fight. So we got some really good options there. I threw in the Manticore just as a flavor of a corpse in the battlefield because it washed down the same chute as them, right? So some fun stuff there. I also grabbed up another copyright-free picture for the background for when I'm describing some stuff back there. This one's got like some light coming in, which I'm going to describe. There's holes in the cavern system, potential ways out, right? That the characters are going to see as, I'm going to make it like an athletics check, and you got to like throw a rope and with the grappling hook up there and try to get hooked onto something that's 40 feet up, so the characters can take quite a bit of damage trying to fall out of there if you use my cheat sheet. So we got some good options there. Once they get out of there, where are we going next? So if we go to the Woodlands map again here, the characters are going to be going from Lemoore over here, and they're going to be going to Arboretum, theoretically. Now, what we do have is a situation where Wallaby doesn't know that, which could be fun. It could make a delay in time or something like that, where they need to start hauling butt, which would start making the characters suffer strain when they start running into encounters. It really invokes that timetable, right? Well, either way, the characters are going to have to walk for about a day or two. I just kind of assume 2 days. 2 days until they get into the heart of the forest, right? So this perimeter is just the start of the forest, what we call the Fringewood. So I just described the first day the second day, what they can come across, and then I started to think about what they're going to run into once they get into there, which some of that we already covered in our session 0, right? Our session campaign session 1 prep. So what I did is I flushed some of that stuff out a little bit more. So what I did is here we've got, let's go on my table of contents, the Fringewood. So they're going to run into some rural homes on day 1, kind of dusted around outside of Lemoore. Day 2, things start to get tight-knit, much more tight-knit because it's much more dangerous the further away you are. And so they've got a small little commune. I've named some of the people who run the commune, and they're going to know a little bit about the Deerman tribe because they would be trading with them and stuff like that, and why they are friends with those guys. I made these guys centaurs, so they're just kind of more of a arbitrators for those folks. So it worked out pretty good there, I think. And then we've got the Fringewood. So we've got a description of how they're going to get into the Fringewood, how they're first going to meet the Deerman tribe, and then all I did is I added some NPCs. So I got some lieutenants, and then a captain, or whatever you want to describe who the lieutenants report to. I've got 5 different NPCs and kind of their descriptions and a little bit of their temperaments on for when the players actually start meeting them. They ask people's names, so I don't have to make it up on the fly. I've got a nice little list here. I don't think my players are going to get any further than that. In fact, I don't even think they're going to use all of this before the end of session 2. And so that pretty much paints the picture. I did note that Wallaby doesn't know Emery's timetable, so that'll be a fun thing to make sure that I tease at in the next session. I did note that I should include some weather descriptions moving forward, because there's some fun weather types or patterns in this world that are not in our normal world, right? We have what's called scald spells and bud wakes, which is their form of being really rainy or being really sunny, that sort of thing. And so we can include those and go from there. Well, that's about it. So if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I'll be seeing you for session 2 of Call of the Hunger. Thank you for joining.